What's up, Broncos country? This week's episode is a playoff special. This week we talk about the team still in the race, the team still in the hunt. We talk about how it affects our Denver Broncos, and we break down how Denver is going to find a way to get into the playoffs. So before we get into it, remember to like, remember to share, remember to subscribe, remember to send me presents, and let's jump into the episode. As I said, this is going to be a playoff special where we're going to break down the upcoming opponents for the Broncos. We're going to get into a analyzation of the teams ahead of us that hopefully we need to leapfrog to get into the playoffs, and then we'll wrap everything up. I am not going to go into every scenario and situation and what each team needs to do. It's a 10-minute show. We just don't have the kind of time. I don't have the kind of brain power, so we're not going to even get into that. However, I will break down what Denver should be doing and how I think they're going to play out these next three games, and then I'll break down each team that is ahead of us and see where I think they'll be as well. So starting off, we have the Pats at home on Sunday night. I know a lot of people are already kind of underestimating the Pats because they're not very good right now. However, they're still a tough team when it comes to running the ball. Denver needs to run the ball to have an effective offense. This could be a challenging game, especially if it snows. There is weather in the forecast over the weekend, so that could be a factor in this as well. If you line them up 11 on 11, Denver should win. However, I just have a feeling that even I think we will win. I just think it's going to be a lot more grimy and a lot more contested than we really hope. Now, moving along, we get the Chargers at home. This, I think, will be the easiest of the three games. And I say that because I think the Chargers are just going through the motions right now. They have an interim coach. They have no GM. Justin Herbert is hurt. Everybody's just going through the motions until the offseason, and then they're going to start going in another direction with their franchise. We always play the Chargers well at home. I don't think there's anything for them to play for. Even being a spoiler, I think, is maybe asking a little bit too much from them. And based on how we play them in Los Angeles, I think this will be the easiest of the three games. And provided we make it out of the New England game with no significant injuries, I think we have them at home. Now, we move on to the finale versus Vegas. This one gives me some butterflies. And it gives me some pause because, A, we never seem to play very well in Vegas. And B, Vegas can be dangerous. Not because I think they're talented, although they do have some talented players. And not because I think they're exceptionally good. But they just seem to always play us well. And they have a ball control offense, and they have a battering ram back there in Josh Jacobs. When you combine those things, Denver doesn't do well stopping the run. We saw that in the first game of the year. Anytime we needed to stop, they just handed the ball off to Jacobs, and he was able to rip off 4, 5, 6-yard runs and just really milk the clock, keep drives going. So it's going to be a battle, especially in Vegas. Do I think Denver has the talent to win? Yes. And who knows? Vegas could be. Let's say they lose these next two games. There's no point in them even putting up an effort, even though that their playoff hopes are dim, but they're still there. So if you were to get my reasonable, sober analysis right now, I think Denver goes 3-0. Not because I think that'll happen, because it needs to happen. If they don't win these next three, it's done. It's over. I think from everything that you've heard from the team, they know that the backs are against the wall. This isn't the Texans game. This isn't the Detroit game. There is no margin for error. They need to win these three games, and they need some help. Now, if they win these three and they get a couple losses from the teams ahead of them, anything can happen. They lose one, and it's over. So this is the pressure that you hope for. And as Sean Payton has said, pressure is a privilege. So let's hope that the Broncos are taking this seriously and take care of their business starting on Sunday versus the Pats. So I will be looking at my iPad to reference the teams that we're going to be analyzing because, frankly, I just can't keep all that information straight in my head. So we're going to start off with the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts have the Falcons, Raiders, and Texans. And by all accounts, the Colts should be a very average to middle-of-the-road team. They lost Anthony Richardson early on. They're starting Gardner Minshew. Jonathan Taylor has been in and out of the lineup, and yet here they are in the driver's seat for the last playoff spot. Now, they do travel on the road to Atlanta this week, and you never really know which Atlanta team you're going to face, even though Atlanta isn't great. But they do finish up with the Raiders at home and then have a tough divisional game versus the Texans in the finale. As much as I hate saying it, I think the Colts are in the driver's seat for one of those last spots, based on the fact that they just seem to be in a better spot than the Falcons. And like I said, you never really know which Falcons team you're going to get, even though they are at home. The Raiders are probably just going through the motions. And that Texans game, again, you don't really know what to expect, because if they do have CJ Stroud for that game, that could be a win for the Texans. If they don't, then who knows what happens there. As much as I hate saying it, I think the Colts can go 2 out of 3, and they can lock down one of those last spots. So the next team we're going to cover is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Browns. Now, if you were to tell me that the Bengals would be in the playoff hunt despite not having Joe Burrow and losing Jamar Chase this past week, I would say that you need to take some money to Vegas and you need to put some money down, because you are on fire. And I would be broke because I would not have done the same thing. The fact that they're playing at such a high level right now, and I was reading somewhere, I don't know the time frame, but over the past few seasons, the Bengals are undefeated in December. So that is a testament to the character of that team to be playing their best ball late in the year when it matters most. So kudos to Zach Taylor and his guys. Now, when you do look at the schedule, though, it doesn't do them any favors. They go to Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Now, both games are going to be crucial games for Kansas City and for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, because they need help getting into the playoffs, too. Kansas City may need help nailing down a home playoff game. So those aren't going to be gimmies. You also look at the finale versus Cleveland. Cleveland's in the hunt, too, for that last playoff spot. So they may need that game. For as much as I don't want to count out the Bengals, because it's been a bit foolhardy to do that, man, looking at that schedule is going to be tough. I would say 1-3 is doable, but I wouldn't be shocked with 0-3. I also wouldn't be shocked if they win all of them either. So at this point, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say 1 out of 3. 1 out of 3. We're going to be positive. So next up, we have the Houston Texans. Now, the Texans have Cleveland at home, Tennessee at home, and then they go on the road to the Colts, as we talked about earlier. Now, this is actually one of the teams that we're going to need some help with, because the Texans do have the tiebreaker over this based on the fact that they won a few weeks ago. I don't see, again, the Browns need this win. And while it is at home, they're not going to have CJ Stroud this week. They're a much different team without CJ Stroud. So I would chalk this up. I mean, that's almost a loss. Even though Case Keenum did play well last week, I still think that that'll be a loss with Cleveland coming in. But that also depends. Sometimes, I mean, Cleveland, beat a bad Chicago team. And I don't know. Everybody's playing a backup quarterback at this point. But let's call it a loss. They're going to lose to Cleveland. Then they have Tennessee. Again, you can't count out Tennessee, even though Tennessee isn't very good. You can't count them out because they still play hard. And they're still, I mean, they have Will Levis back there, who has given them a little bit of a spark and is playing for, basically, he's auditioning for a job next year. So, that, and it's a divisional game. Divisional games are meant to be spoilers this late in the year. And then you finish up with Indianapolis, who, again, they need that win. Now, Texans are a young team. I love where DeMeco Ryans has this team going. I love C.J. Stroud. But they could go 0-3, or they could go 3-0. It's just hard to it's hard to gauge where they're at based on how young they are and the fact that this is going to be a playoff chase for the first time for a lot of them. So seeing as they're a game ahead of us in the standings and they have a tiebreaker, let's hope for 0-3. So the next team we're going to look at is the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills they go on the road to the Chargers, then they have the Pats at home, and then they go on the road to Miami. Now, if you look at those two games to start with, those look very winnable no matter where they're at. They're also a hot team right now. And if you have an elite quarterback, which Josh Allen is, don't be a hater, and you consider those two opponents, they should have those. Now, where I think that it does get a bit tricky is that finale versus the Dolphins. Again, this is going to be for a playoff spot. It's going to be for seeding. Both the teams are going to need it. So that could really come down to anywhere. Buffalo hasn't played a clean game, and they have a tendency to turn the ball over a lot. But Miami really hasn't beaten anybody. And anytime they go up against anybody good, they lose. So who knows where that matchup's going to be. If I had to guess, I would say 2-3 is reasonable. But we really need a loss in there somewhere, just based on the fact that we have that tiebreaker over the Bills. So while I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they run the table, I think 2-3 is more reasonable. And who knows? I mean, I don't think the Chargers, like I said, I think the Chargers are in the same boat that Vegas is in that they're just kind of playing out the season and going through the motions. The Pats, though, are still playing hard, even if they're not very good. So again, divisional game, team that makes for an ugly game, even if they aren't very good in a divisional game. I see 2-3, and even 1-2 is plausible. Let's hope for the latter because, like I said, they are ahead of us in the standings. So lastly, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if you look at all the teams that we've mentioned, and then you include the Steelers, it's kind of one of those, like, which one of these teams is not like the other type of dealie. But yeah, here they are, and they're right in the thick of things. How, I don't know, but they are. So taking a look, they have the Bengals, the Seahawks, and the Ravens. Now, two of those three are on the road, so they're already not great. And because they're not a good team, it's really hard to give them any kind of, like, yes, this game is winnable. No, it isn't winnable. This is one of the teams ahead of us. We need them to lose, plain and simple. And if you look at the three teams they're playing, all three teams are going to be playing competitive football down the stretch because they need those games. You look at the Bengals. Bengals need that game. You look at the Seahawks. Seahawks need that game. The Ravens may have clinched, but do not tell me that the Ravens want to lose the finale to their hated division rival. And don't tell me that the Ravens would not love to knock the Steelers out of playoff contention. So I can't say that I've watched a ton of Steeler football, but they're also not very good. And even after firing their offensive coordinator, it's not like they've gotten that much better on offense. So I can see 0-3 being an entirely plausible scenario here, and let's hope for that. Well, that wraps up our time again for this week. Remember to like, remember to share, remember to subscribe, remember to comment so I can interact with you. Remember to send me presents. And I'll be here next week with hopefully great news coming out of a Denver Bronco win on Sunday. From the past few years, I can say that it's more enjoyable being excited and nervous for these upcoming games rather than resigned to just going through the motions and waiting for the draft. Like Sean Payton says, pressure is a privilege, so we should treat it as thus. So I'll see you next week. Until that time, keep your eye on the ball, and I'll talk to you later.